Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine.
Joe. Little fucking Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine, Frank.
Two Russian missiles struck a hotel late on Wednesday in the center of Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, injuring 11, one seriously. Let's go to Ukraine and get the latest now from Joseph Lindsley. Joe, I hate to hear that news about Kharkiv, as you tell us, one of the most beautiful cities there in Ukraine and in that part of the world.
Indeed, Bob. Hello from Lviv, and Kharkiv is a city from. I've probably spent a total of 4 months there, the past year at least, frequently traveling there, and it's I witnessed that city from February until December of last year, really coming back to life. The Russian attacks had abated; they still happened a couple times a month, but since December 28th. Last year, and the past couple of weeks, the Russians have been pounding that city once again, and they've hit two hotels, direct strikes upon hotels in these past 2 weeks. And I've spoken to you and to the WGN audience from a hotel in Kharkiv, and now I think it's people, anyone who's there as a foreign journalist, as a humanitarian volunteer, or Ukrainians who are traveling, even to see family and friends, any hotel feels like it's a target now, and this certainly seems to be part of the Russian sort of method to scare people. But people are really shaken in that city, I never thought I'd ever say those words because it's such a strong spirited city. Those first Kharkiv really saw the worst of the Russian onslaught, some of the worst. In February, March, and April of 2022. I mean, I remember speaking with people in Kharkiv about the first day and the first days of Russia's full-scale invasion, and everyone was sort of in a bit of shock. But you would try to, go check on your family, your neighbors, or run to the shop, and artillery was hitting everywhere, just everywhere in the city, and so because of all they went through, they're pretty sturdy souls. But the events of these past 2 weeks have really shaken people. It doesn't seem like people are leaving in great droves. In fact, I suspect that by hitting the hotels, Russia is trying to discourage Westerners from being there, not only from helping, but also from being there to report and to tell the stories of that place. Kharkiv it's a Russian-speaking city. Obviously, now many people are trying to speak Ukrainian. Because they want to reject every bit of Russian culture, which for them is epitomized by these missile attacks. But it's a Russian-speaking city. But the big difference between Kharkiv and cities in Russia is that people are fiercely free in Kharkiv. They want to live in freedom, and it has a reputation as being the cleanest city in Ukraine. Ukrainians are known for being clean, but Kharkiv is it's impeccable. In the parks, the lawns in the summertime are perfectly green, and no one walks on the grass. The sidewalks are clean, and even after missile strikes, people immediately start cleaning up. But there's been so much damage there these past weeks that from the photographs and videos I've seen, I was there I was there about a month ago, and from what I've seen, it looks unrecognizable in so many ways. And as I think about what's happening there. And what's happening in so many places around the world. There's a quote from J.R.R. Tolkien. He says, he wrote, "The board is set, the pieces are moving. We come to it at last, the great battle of our time." And I'm feeling this in many ways here. I just had several hours of meetings here in Ukraine, and there's a lot of turmoil around the world. There's a lot of tyrants. Not only Putin, but tyrants around the world, and sending missiles and attacking people. I mean, the South Korean government said yesterday that what they're observing is that Russia is using North Korean weapons here in Ukraine, and South Korea says that Russia is helping North Korea actually test its nuclear capabilities, because some of the missiles that Russia is sending to Ukraine are missiles that could carry nukes. and so South Korea is warning that that this is extremely dangerous. But while we also see the problems, from the threats from tyrannical regimes and from terrorists, there's also there's many groups of people working to counter this and fight this. And as I was meeting with people here this morning in Lviv from all over the world, from Brazil to the U.S., different countries in Europe, Japan, and you see these sort of brave little groups of people who refuse to ignore these threats and are finding ways to counter it, even though everything is extremely heavy. And I also was meeting with Ukrainians who, everyone is extremely exhausted, and these attacks of the past weeks have really hurt people. But Ukrainians are fired up in a way. I don't think they realize how fired up they are, but I had several meetings the past days where Ukrainians are working to fight corruption within Ukraine, to fight, people with Soviet mindset in the military and in the government. And there really is, I see a new energy of this because they realize it's necessary, and there's not much time in a sense. And interestingly, and not far away in the country of Sweden, the Kingdom of Sweden, the civil defense minister of Sweden, they had a big defense conference a couple of days ago. He said to the Swedes, "Are you a private individual? Have you considered whether you have time to join a voluntary defense organization? If not, get moving." And this is extraordinary because Sweden has not been in a war since either it was the late 1700s or early 1800s. The Swedish army was actually in Ukraine in the late 1700s, but they have not had a war in centuries. They were neutral during World War II, but now, for the first time in centuries, the Swedes are on alert. And I spoke to some friends there, and they said, yes, they feel this sense that it's, that for 20 years, especially these past 20 years, they were sort of ignoring the threat that Russia posed, and they share a border with Russia. But there's a new sense of alertness there. And then in the neighboring country to Ukraine, Poland, today there are massive protests in Warsaw. There's a lot going on there, and I haven't had time to fully make sense of it, but I think we all have to pay attention to it. Two members of parliament who were previously senior members of the government were in the presidential palace of President Duda, and then the police, under the orders of the new government, the new prime minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, went into the palace, the presidential palace, and arrested two former senior members of parliament. And as a result, there's massive protest in Warsaw. There's many people wondering what is the hand of Russia in these situations. Then you have the country of Georgia across the Black Sea from Ukraine. Georgians in Ukraine, there's many Georgians fighting in Ukraine. They have great affinity with each other. They both suffered under Soviet times. And there was a former president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, and he actually he went into exile. He reformed Georgia and then ran into pro-Russian interests. And he came to exile in Ukraine and was governor of Odessa region, where he was fighting corruption. But now he's in Georgia in a prison, this great, sort of leader of the Georgian resistance, because the Georgian government is controlled by Russians. And we see sort of the influence of not just Moscow, but Beijing and Tehran and many others maneuvering around the world, while free people are trying to stem this tide. And of course, this is spilling into the conversations in America with our presidential politics. And so there's a great, I would say maybe in a sense there's a new energy here right now, because everyone realizes that, I would say last week, everyone says this is exhausting. When is this going to stop? But I think now people have realized this is a new time to fight.
And all of this leads me to this email from one of our listeners. Thomas writes, "Dear Bob, on your show, your Ukrainian reporter lamented the fact that his favorite coffee shop had been destroyed in the war. You stated that you couldn't imagine how terrible it would be if your favorite breakfast spot was suddenly gone. Now try to imagine what it would be like if every building in the entire area, from the Loop to Fullerton, was flattened by artillery fire, bombs, and missiles. Imagine every resident and neighbor dead, wounded, buried in rubble, concussed, and suffering from traumatic brain injuries." And that's how you're feeling, I know, about the places that you would go to there in Kharkiv that are now gone. It's terrible.
Yeah, and this is, if in 2014 the Ukrainian people had not protested in the streets and they had just agreed to let this, corrupt pro-Russian government control them and live their quiet lives and kept their mouths shut, this would not be happening, because there would be no need for it. Russia would control this, but the Ukrainians made a stand, and it was, I see so many people in America praising protesters in Germany or other places around the world, but the story of what happened 10 years ago in Ukraine gets missed. They made a stand, and no one regrets that. I don't talk to any, everyone is proud of what they did in 2014, but they know that's exactly why Russia is sending missiles every day to try to erase this story of freedom here.
Joseph Lindsley in Lviv. Joe, thanks again for your unique insights, and we'll talk tomorrow.
Until tomorrow. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що сказав?
Well, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?